Maps out.
Oh, we already took ours.
So we're getting
Yeah,
everyone's
we know where we're at
dressing.
anyway.
So our first map with the Army's approach. Right about dead center of the map, you're going to see Pritchard's Hill with Mulligan, and below Mulligan, the Pritchard House marker. The Pritchard House is right there, so you can orient yourself. So if you're standing and you've got your map facing with, you know, all the words so you can perfectly read them and you're facing that way, you're oriented properly. So that's the Pritchard House, the brick house there. Opequon Presbyterian Church, you can't really make out from here because of the trees over there, but directly we'll see it at our next stop. But I want to orient you to some of the landscape here, just things that big picture that are off of the map. So to our east, you have the Blue Ridge. Several important gaps. You've got Snickers Gap. You see that little V in the mountains there? There's a big brushy pine or tree sitting up there, and then right to the right of it is Snickers Gap. Go across that ridge to the next down, that's Ashby's Gap. That's Route 50 goes through over there. This is Route 7. Down there, your next gap is Manassas Gap, 66. And then down there you've got Massanutten Mountain, almost directly south of where we're at. That splits the Shenandoah Valley into two. Over off in the distance there, you can barely over the top of the trees make out the Allegheny Mountains there. You can also see them a little bit more to your direction, right? Those trees on the ridge beyond there, that's Sandy Ridge. There will be some activity with the Second Battle of Kernstown over there, but that's the heaviest action from the 1862 Valley with Stonewall Jackson would occur over on that ridge there. The battles are going to be kind of inversed. Heavy action in 62 is Sandy Ridge. Heavy action in 64 is here at the Pritchard Farm in Pritchard's Hill. So beyond us here, try and point out some important land features. If you look, there's a couple of industrial kind of silos straight off ahead, then another one to your left, and then you keep going to the left, you're going to see a wooded ridge over there. At some points you can see through some of the trees trucks and cars. That's the high ground where Interstate 81 is. That's going to be a decisive location on the battlefield. Confederates will march behind that ridge, come up, get in the line of battle just behind it, and come up and launch a devastating flank attack. I want to try and point out some of these things now, because when we're down in the low ground talking about this chronologically, it's sometimes hard to see all of that, but you have the living map of the entire battlefield when you're here on Pritchard's Hill. So down out straight ahead of the Pritchard House, that industrial area is, that there was a woodlot down there beyond the Pritchard Farm known as Barton's Woods. You're going to hear that's going to be an area Confederates are going to use to shelter during the early stages of the battle. So it's really going across, if you just go straight ahead and through the field, you'll see a tree line over there. There's a small creek called Hog Run. When we walk by that, you're going to see it's like 8, 9, 10 feet deep down in the ground. At the time of the battle, soldiers who went back and forth over that thing half a dozen times during the day don't even mention it. And you can see in an artist's sketch of that field done a few weeks after the battle, it's like a stream rolling through a grass field. It's not very deep. Everything that you're going to see out there is erosion from 20th century and 21st century development there. All right, so where we're at on Pritchard's Hill, after the reconnaissance that the Confederate cavalry had launched on the 23rd, Crook is going to leave some troops down here. They are going to be under the command of Colonel James Mulligan. Mulligan was a Democrat from Chicago. He had been a fervent supporter of Stephen Douglas in the 1860 elections. In that day and age, there was no cable news networks where candidates where you'd see them on TV every day or somewhere in the whole country is seeing what they're doing and what they're saying, you know, and transportation limitations. So you had advocates in every cities, the communities, and Mulligan, he was a Irish Catholic, very devout man from Chicago. Prominent, grew up, he was born in upstate New York, but grew to adulthood in Chicago area. He grew up at a time where it was said there was even occasionally a Native American would come into town. So, but he would go out there and give these impassioned speeches on behalf of Stephen Douglas. And then when the South starts breaking away, when Lincoln was elected president and he has to form an army, Lincoln's reaching out to Unionist Democrats across the North to rally to the Union cause. And so Mulligan's going to be one of these. He's going to get authorization through Stephen Douglas from Lincoln to organize what was known as Mulligan's Irish Brigade. Officially, it is the 23rd Illinois, where we had someone, there we go, there she is. She had an ancestor who was shot somewhere out here on this battlefield. You can look ahead right now and know that you're probably looking at the ground where he fell at on that day. So he raises this Irish regiment, and he's organizing it in Chicago, and as fate would have it, you know, you've got these Irishmen, blue-collar guys mostly, and they get quartered while they're in a barracks, an old brewery. So they're there in Chicago, and he's going to organize them. They're going to be down in Missouri, at Lexington, Missouri. Mulligan will end up by being the senior officer there in command of a small force of about 3,000 Union troops when he's besieged by about 10 or 11,000 Confederates under Sterling Price and Philip Van Dorn. He's going to hold out gallantly, and you know, at one point during that siege, they're going to send a flag of truce in and ask if he wants to talk terms of surrender, and he jokingly tells the Confederate officer bearing the message, he says, "I accept your surrender." He's pretty enterprising. They try and hold out. They're running out of ammunition. They're actually created a foundry in the basement of a college building there, and they're making more musket balls for the men. But he has to surrender. While he's there, his young wife, Marion Nugent Mulligan, she's never far away, and she's going to show up there, and she's going to go to the Confederate commander and demand to see him, her husband, and the commander's like, "Madame, no, he's in the prison camp, and that's not a fitting place for you." And she said, "Well, if it's good enough for Colonel Mulligan, it's good enough for Mrs. Mulligan." And they said within a week she was running the Confederate camp there. She had use of Sterling Price's personal buggy, and ultimately these guys are going to be exchanged, and it's going to be a rather roundabout process. And this is 61. Mulligan's men, you know, they're going to be coming east on the railroad. They end up on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad late August, early September of 1862. And, you know, they're going to stop in West Virginia briefly, and then they continue on farther east on the B&O. And the rumor was under Mulligan is they were going to join Thomas Francis Meagher's famous Irish Brigade in the Army of the Potomac, which would have been their dream. Well, they got let off, stopped too early, and they're going to spend most of the next 2 years guarding the B&O and chasing down rebel raiders and guerrillas in the mountains of West Virginia. In the spring of 1864, Mulligan's men are going to re-enlist, and they're going to get veteran furloughs for doing so, which means that since most of the men in the regiment re-enlisted, they got to go home to Chicago. And because they were in Chicago, that's why they're not going to take part in Newmarket, Piedmont, and Lynchburg, because they weren't here when they pulled all the troops down to go. But when Early retreats, he arrives back here. Now, one of the things I like to tell people is one of these stories here where people have premonitions of their death. Mulligan, when he was back in Chicago, he started going to Mass every day, and he was talking to his priest, and he was getting ready to leave to come back. He turns to him and he tells him, and this priest was a man who Mulligan had gone to college with at St. Mary's of the Lake up there in the Chicago area. So it was someone who was a friend as well, and he confides in him and says, I'm really going to need your prayers. I don't know what it is, but I feel a real strong need. So he's going to come back. He's going to hook up with George Crook's command and join him over at Snicker's Gap just before the Battle of Cool Spring. He served under Sigel, and he didn't think too much of Sigel and some of the German or Dutch generals, as they called them. And he was with them while Early was raiding. And he was also served briefly under the Frenchman Duffier, the cavalry commander. And Mulligan noted in his diary, he found Crook to be a breath of fresh air, and it was fine. It was good to have a general who knew English and had some common sense to him. His opinion's going to change very rapidly. A couple days, July 22nd, Crook's organizing all the troops that he has. The backbone is the army that made the Lynchburg raid, or the remnants of it, and the reinforcements. Now Mulligan, he's the senior colonel of all the infantry. Technically, Mulligan was entitled to command the largest infantry division. But Crook had two men with whom he had served throughout the campaign going back to Maine, Colonel Joseph Thoburn and Colonel Isaac Duvall, both West Virginians. Both of them had significant combat experience, had been in the Valley campaign in 1862. Thoburn had fought during the Second Manassas campaign, as well as everything in the Valley. He was at every battle in the Valley leading up to this in 1864. And so Crook was very confident with them. So what he did is he called out a small command of about 1,800 men and broke it into two small brigades and put Mulligan in command of that small brigade, which was a small division, which was really just a brigade in size. Mulligan writes in his diary that same day, he says, "I have taken the measure of General Crook. His name says it." Crook robbed me of what was mine, that I was entitled to. But I think it was a good military decision. So anyway, Mulligan's here on the night of the 23rd. Again, I mentioned Mulligan's men, they're up here. They didn't have a priest, so they did their best the morning of the 24th, which was a Sunday, to keep the day holy. And they doesn't last too long, though. They start hearing guns in the distance where the Union cavalry and horse artillery is skirmishing with the vanguard. Mulligan had sensed with that he had been sent out to patrol with the cavalry later in the day on the 23rd, and he sensed something with that large cavalry force, that something might be up. And his men have never really been in a major set-piece battle. And so it's getting a little jittery up here. 280 men in the 23rd Illinois, plus he's got the 10th West Virginia and a couple other units as well. But he's up here with him is the 23rd Illinois. And so he's there somewhere in the headquarters wagon. Mulligan didn't drink, he didn't smoke, but he pulls out this big cigar and he's twirling it between his fingers, smiling and joking around with the men, acting like he's puffing on it. And the fact that the men knew he wasn't a smoker, they got a kick out of him doing that. And one soldier, a captain, wrote in his memoir, he said, he gave us a Broadway smile there with that, and he got his men calmed down. And before you know, the sounds of battle keep getting closer, and that's General John C. Vaughn leading 3 brigades of Confederate cavalry forward towards Kernstown. If you'll take a look here at your first map, you'll see you go right down the Valley Pike from the Pritchard Hill Mulligan position. You're going to see cavalry out there in position. They've been being driven closer back. That's Tibbetts cavalry. That's the Union cavalry. They're driven back. Duffier with the rest of that division is going to be at Winchester. He will eventually bring them forward to reinforce, but they're still going to have to fall back. Mulligan is going to move forward. George Crook is going to come here and assess the situation personally, and he will stay here. Him and Duffier come at the same time, and Crook's going to he's going to bring out the division of Colonel Joseph Thoburn, veteran of the 62 Valley campaign, and it's going to go into a holding position at the northern end of Sandy Ridge, you know, covering the back road and the middle road, so Confederates can't move around this position here. He's also going to have, again, Duffier's other brigade, but he's going to come down here, and he's still relatively skeptical. About 10 o'clock, Mulligan's going to get orders to move out into the low ground there and take up the skirmishing. And we will pick up this story with Mulligan, what happens to him when we're actually out there in that ground here shortly. Crook is going to go back to Winchester at this point, and he has another division of cavalry, about 1,800 men strong, under General William Averill. So he is going to order Averill to go on a flanking mission. If you look, you see where Crook in the upper right-hand corner there and Averill right below him. That cavalry division is going to be sent down the Front Royal Road, right, the old Front Royal Road, and its mission is to go all the way south until it gets to the road that cuts over to Stevens City, which was called Newtown back in the Civil War time. That road is where Dinosaur Land comes out there today. And his mission is to go beyond what Crook is thinking is a strong reconnaissance in force. You know, he's going to have Mulligan and these guys pressing up the pike, and Averill's going to come around behind him and be there. Oh, so when they retreat, they're going to run into his waiting arms. Perfect plan. You know, he's going to bag himself a couple thousand Confederates maybe, if this plan works out. The problem is with George Crook here is the information he's operating on is not the reality. He's not banking on 16,000, 17,000 Confederates. You know, I think he's thinking that there's maybe this cavalry force, and I think one source said a division of Confederate infantry was out there. So he's thinking he's going to have a few thousand men, and that he's going to accomplish something there. So that's how this battle is developing. In the meantime, Jubal Early's cavalry, who's going to have two brigades, John Vaughn and Bradley Johnson, out in front covering, some posted in Barton's Woods. He's also going to have a brigade under the command of Colonel William L. Jackson coming up the middle road. You see, you go above the blue and gray symbol, you see McGill and Jackson. That's Jackson. Now he is from what's now West Virginia, and he's a cousin of Stonewall Jackson. It is said, George Crook wrote in his memoirs, he said, he was given the name Mudwall in contradistinction to the abilities of his more famous cousin. But he's out there. These Confederate cavalry guys, Early doesn't like them, and you know that gets picked up on, and they're horribly maligned. But when they're out here, you got to look at most of the troops. They're like the second string cavalry. This isn't Jeb Stuart's elite cavalry from the Army of Northern Virginia. But when these guys are out here against the same relative troops, you know, the Western Virginia guys that don't have that experience and armaments that the Maine does, they're going to do very well, and you're going to see that on this battlefield. And they've done very well during the Maryland raid as well. Some of them will have some screw up. But anyway, Mudwall's men are going to push forward, and Mulligan, this set of woods here extended down this ridge. This ridge extends off down towards the middle road. You can't see it, but there's a big church back in there. And in that wooded area, there's a couple companies of what were Pennsylvania Reserves. Most of the regiments had mustered out of service, but the men who had re-enlisted were now part of the 54th Pennsylvania that Mulligan has up here once the battle starts, supporting the artillery here. So this hill where we're on, you get the good vista here, but when you're being attacked, this is a wonderful artillery platform. Initially, the main battery that was here is Battery E, 1st West Virginia Light, the Upshur artillery from Upshur County, West Virginia, is all up on the hill. And then he's going to move a section probably right down into this shelf-like area here where he'll have 4 traps over there as well to support the Union troops that are moving out into those fields. Jackson's men, there's going to be a Captain David Poe. He's going to be given 70 men, told to dismount and take his men forward. And again, he's over towards the middle road where you're seeing cars behind you right now. And he's ordered to move forward until he gets to the ridge in the woods. And then they creep up there and they look and they see that strong force of Union skirmishers posted there. They open fire. Union artillery starts firing at them, and they hightail it out of there. Captain Poe reported, to this day, he wrote a memoir like 30 years later, said, to this day I still haven't reported to Colonel Jackson what I saw out on that hill. So, but they're going to fall back in there, but you know, they were out in advance. So you've got Confederate cavalry. You're also going to have a Confederate cavalry brigade under John McCausland coming north from Front Royal, on the Front Royal Road. Right now on this map, you only see Johnson. Johnson's going to move over more towards our area for a while. So any questions on how this battle's developing?
What time of day are we?
So we started at Crook. Crook leaves here at 10 o'clock in the morning.
On the 24th.
The 24th. The skirmishing starts 7 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning, a few miles south of us between the cavalry, and then they start driving them back slowly at 10 o'clock. We will talk about the main Confederate infantry is going to start arriving about an hour later, and we'll talk about that when we go out into the field.
Since you're talking about Mulligan, can you talk a little bit about Fort Mulligan out in Petersburg, what happened out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Mulligan was a commander, as I've mentioned, where he's stationed at various points in West Virginia, kind of garrison duty. He builds the fort, and it's still there. But one of the things I'd like to talk about when he's out in that area, before he was in command, it was General Robert Milroy, who had been very harshly treating the local population in that part of West Virginia. And, you know, because their husbands were all away in the Confederate Army for the most part. So he wasn't lifting a finger, even though he could have provided food. Well, Mulligan comes in after Milroy's sacked in the middle of 1863, post-Gettysburg campaign. And he's going to change that. He's going to treat these families and make sure they're looked after. And there'll be one woman in particular who's written letters to her brother who is in Jubal A's army. And they spoke about Mulligan, about how well he had treated them. And Richmond Papers, after Mulligan dies, is going to call him a generous foe there. So, but yeah, I don't know too much about, I don't know if much ever happened at that fort or not, even there. Do you live in the area there?
No, I've been out there, and you know, the fort's in good shape.
Yeah, and I know that they've preserved it and
yeah,
have an open interpretation. So,
how was Early scouting? Did he kind of really have a good sense for what he was up against?
well, Early's got his cavalry has done an excellent job, you know, and he knew that all he had left was the Hunter's army, you know, out here, what was available.
So he's fairly aware that the opposing force was not just smaller, but actually a lot of them were still pretty green.
Yeah, he knows what he has.
Yeah.
He's fought them at Lynchburg, and the thing is, you know, the Second Corps Army of Northern Virginia, it's down in numbers in '64. It's lean and mean.
Yeah.
There's lax discipline in the camps and things. You read these inspection reports, but when these guys get to the battlefield, they get the job done. And I got a friend, Mike Miller. He used to be a professor down at the U.S. Marine Corps University in Quantico. We were talking about that in the '64, and he had an analogy, some stories. He talked about some of these Marine Corps battalions and companies that did take these massive casualties, but they're much smaller, but the cadre of experienced men as they moved through the war, highly efficient.
Yeah, these were hardcore survivors.
Yeah. So most of them, like I said, every battle in the East, the Army of Northern Virginia is there, and the Second Corps is usually planning to keep rolling it. So it's that experience factor.
What was the range of the artillery?
Well, the gun's up here. He's got some 10-pound Parrott rifles, and they're a little over a mile, a couple thousand yards.
So they'll get clear to the tree line.
Yeah.
Way beyond.
Yeah,
They can
beyond
range
that.
the very far end of Sandy Ridge from here, a mile and a half away,
Yeah.
before they start losing their range.
What happens when a cannonball lands?
Well, so it's a cannonball, which like these guns up here are rifled, and it's got shells. And a lot of times your shells could have explode, but if it's just a cannonball, it's not going to explode. It'll tear through battle lines, rip men to shreds and things. But the Union has mostly rifle pieces, so they're firing shells. All right.
If you want to know more about that, see Larry after this.
Oh yeah,
and he'll go through the whole display.
Yep.
They got various.
Can they see the enemy from up here? Like, can you see
Oh
it
yeah.
yet?
Yeah. The other thing, here's another important thing. A question: can you see from here?
Fewer trees, yes.
This is a wood-consuming society. You're burning wood for cooking. You're burning wood for heating your home. You burn wood to make your transportation. Your wheels on your wagon are wooden. Everything's made of wood. So all these trees are cleared out. Plus, it's all agricultural here. It's all open fields. And that's why that what we would call like Barden's Woods, where the manufacturing establishment is down there, those really stand out at the time, and they're going to attract troops into them for cover because there's not a lot of that. You probably see everything up to that horizon.
Absolutely.
Where they see that tower, the cell phone tower to the right of that white building there. Anything up on that high ground, you would have been able to see.
And Kernstown's a very small village. And so you would have these cannons, some of them over here on the military crest, could easily range all of the Valley Pike. With pretty good.
These guys had, like,
Yeah.
you know you're going to be fighting them the next day.
Yeah, you hear it coming, you hear it, you hear it beyond, and then first you'd see guys coming over the ridge there. First you'd see your cavalry falling back before them. So it's all very visual.
You got to remember, this is a high ground coming into Winchester from the south. So during the day, most of these trees were here. You could see for miles down the Valley Turnpike from here. The Valley Turnpike was the only macadamized road in the area. So if you've got an army coming in from the south with artillery, wagons, and horses, they used that road. So usually whoever controlled Winchester had a presence on this hill.
And Kernstown's interesting. It's a little kind of a blue-collar hub, a lot of shops and things
machine
going
shops.
on here. Mr. Pritchard was a wheelwright, wagon wheels and things here. So, and there was a small network of roads that were all coming into Kernstown, and especially going back to the colonial area, Winchester has now subsumed it within its environments. Where do we?
But real quick, the machine shop actually in Kernstown for 4 years, right before the late great unpleasantness of say started in 1861, had a little advertisement that said CSS or SR, which is Mr. Pritchard in that house, and his youngest brother in another house. Come see them to see our equipment in action. They're very mechanized, and a lot of that was in that machine shop. They're buying sawmill, harvesting stuff, and he had a portable steam engine. High speed. He'd be out getting the iPhone 18 here in a month. He would. Very modern kind of people.
But he still hired slaves.
Yes.
Rented
He
them.
did.
His dad and grandfather owned them.
And, well, let's head down to the wall.